This is a special presentation of the Ticats Audio Network.
Great to have you with us, and this is a good one to be with us for. I'm RJ Broadhead, joined by the newest member of the Hamilton Sports Group, Steve Milton. You're going to be a multi-platform columnist with Ticats Audio Network, Forge Audio Network. You're going to be website. You're going to be doing a little bit of everything. Tell us how this all came about.
Well, the main impetus, I think, RJ, and you and I have talked about this working together again, like we did so often over the years.
Yep.
And it came up when I was still working at the newspaper, and when that ended for me, I wasn't ready to be done. I'm not going to let somebody else tell me when I'm done, right? I mean, that sounds like an old player, doesn't it?
It does, but that's the right way to go.
The Ticats had shown some cursory interest at one point because they wanted to build up the whole, I would call their media situation, right? It become more of a media type thing, and to expand it, to take the good work that you guys and men and women have done in Ticats Audio Network and Forge Audio Network, both of which, by the way, that your viewers may not understand, are radical concepts for their time, and it is the way of the future. It is the way of the future, and the Ticats showed that they were going to. They want to expand that a little more, all platforms, including more on the Forge, and enhancing the relationship between the fans, people that care, and people that only sort of partially care. They want to expand that. Now, in this day and age, I'm just coming out of an industry where I spent half a century. It was contracting and continued to contract and continue to contract. And here is a group that is taking basically the same principle, which is it's all in sports, but it's a journalism. It's a type of journalism, and is expanding it. Who wouldn't want to be part of that? Exactly opposite of the trend that the world is going, and I applaud that, and I wanted to be part of that. I've obviously and wrote about it in the first column, which appears today, that I want to be part of wherever that goes, and investing time and resources in making the connection between fans and enhancing sports fans' experience. I've spent my whole life, going back to when I was 17 years old, in and around professional sport. So this was a great opportunity. You want to be part of something new, and this is, while we are advancing principles that already exist, it is new. It is new, this kind of commitment. I think it'll set the tone for a lot of things in the future. And I like sort of the idea of the Ticats trying new things and having the guts to hire a veteran, and I would say hardcore, journalist. That takes corporate confidence and takes corporate belief in itself that you can handle basically an outsider coming inside.
Oh, so it's an easy hire, Steve. You're a Hall of Famer. You're a Canadian Football Hall of Famer.
You know what that means? It means you outlast everybody. So
you stick around long enough.
Stick around long enough, and you become a legend. And as long as as we said with my 17th century judge's hair here, so.
Now that you're going to be now that you're going to be appearing more, are you going to be down the hair dye aisle, or are you going to stick with that?
Oh no, I think I'll stick with that. It's sort of
I like it.
If you got it flaunted, right? I mean, obviously I'm a long-haired guy. I don't think you saw me during the pandemic when I had what it looked like the greatest hits of the '60s band album.
Yeah, well, I think you got it cut.
Yeah, I know.
I would have seen you in 2021 a little bit.
That's right. Yeah, and I had it really, really, really long then. But I'm an ex-hippie. All right, I grew up in the '60s, right? So I bring that sensibility to a lot of things in my life, and a lot of it is what's on top. Let's say snow in the I won't even use that phrase. Snow on the roof, fire in the furnace, right? So
you had to do it.
I had to do it. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting you bring up how Ticats Audio Network launched in 2021. Forge Audio Network has been fantastic, and I remember having conversations with Matt Affinek and Scott Mitchell. I was the first hire of the Ticats Audio Network, and I'm very proud of that. But when the concept was brought to me, it was brand new. There weren't a lot of teams doing their own broadcasts and having their own network. And I think the way regional rights have gone in a lot of professional sports, that the Tiger Cats are kind of the front runners in that aspect. I think we'll see a lot more of this going forward, and it's been great going into the fourth year now and covering the team. Can you still be critical of the Tiger Cats or the Forge in this role, Steve, if you have to be?
I think as long as it's fair, we've discussed this at length. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was wiggle room on that. Now, I do understand a couple of things that I'm working for the team, and I think some people might say he can't do that, but like it's a little bit different than newspapers that way, and part of it is because of the half century in journalism. I trust myself. I trust my own principles, and I won't cross any lines that I can't cross. In other, I mean, from a journalistic standpoint. So there'll be, I'm sure, times when stuff is well, it's too much inside stuff and delicate stuff but for the most part, the theory is be fair, be honest, analyze when it analyzes. Not everything I did at the Spec was ripping the Tiger Cats. I mean, it definitely wasn't that. I mean, there was plenty of opportunity for that for the last couple of years because, let's be honest, it was 2 years of 8-10 and losing playoff games, right? So they made the playoffs, which is a great thing, and we always try to point that out. But there's a lot of other things as well that go into reporting, and much of that is ferreting out and telling the stories of the people. Storytelling is what I do. Criticism is part of that storytelling, but storytelling is the larger thing, and that, my understanding, is where we want to progress this, where it's going to evolve. And this is an evolution; it's not a revolution. It's an evolution because of what you people have done already in the audio and what the Ticat Forge websites have done in basic reporting. I think we're just going to expand that and also amplify it. And that's why it's called a columnist and not a content provider, because columnist implies that there's analysis, that there's criticism which is fair when it is merited, and I think you'll particularly see that on game day. Because that's when it's hot. That's when people want to know what somebody who's been around it since I've been around the CFL. I think I was at my first game in 1957.
Wow! Is that as a fan?
Yeah, and actually I was at a game that it was at Varsity Stadium for the Argos, and that's how long ago it was. They've played, I think, in 3 or 4 stadia since then, and the record was set there that'll never be broken, and it happened right in front of me. It made me an instant CFL fan. And it was back in those days. It was recorded for years as a punt return, but only because punt returns and missed field goals had the same rules. You could not block for the player. It was 1 against 12, right?
Wow.
So it was actually a missed field goal, and somebody took it, I want to say Claire Exelby or somebody like that, one of those Argos that played for 20 years, on the one side of the end zone and threw it right across the other side, 2 yards from the end, to a guy named Dave Mann, whose nickname was Superman, who played for the Chicago Cardinals and been an all-star football player in the NFL, and had come up to play for the Argos because, believe it or not, they paid more. So he gets the ball and runs straight down the sideline, and we've got seats on the 4th row, and he runs right by me, and he goes 137 yards for the touchdown. That record can never be broken because the end zones were 25 yards deep then. They're down 20. So the most that you can go for a touchdown was 130 yards, and he ran 135 or 4 or whatever it is. So it will always stand as the record. Instant fan right away. And from that point on, I followed it, wanted to play in the CFL, and then God's practical joke got in the way, made you 5'6". Isn't that funny? And then keeps shrinking you for the rest of your life. That's the other part of the joke, right? So, so I always thought that if I ever got in the Hall of Fame, it would be as a player. Well, I never got a sniff. I called the Argos during my high school years, and I played for in those times they had farm teams, right? And I played for the ORFU, where you were owned by your local team, your rights. And then there was also senior ORFU, which was semi-pro, and I played for them in the last 2 or 3 years in the early 70s, for ironically, the team London Lords, whose players were owned territorially by the Tiger Cats. Now, I didn't have a sniff. Lots of people did. Lots of people off our team. I think 15 guys on our team played in the CFL. So I saw them going up towards the CFL or coming back down from it. One of whom made the Hall of Fame, the late Glenn Weir. So there's quite a connection there between myself and this league, the CFL.
Well, I'm just going to go grab a coffee, Steve. You continue on. No,
sorry. Yeah, I do this. Yeah,
hey, great story, and you're employee of the month.
Yeah.
After that, if that's the sort of information that people are going to get, whether they're reading, listening, watching you, that is some fantastic historical stuff.
Well, you try to throw. I think one thing I've always tried to do is pack things in. So, you waste words for style. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't go for the style points. I do. I mean, I'm a writer more than a reporter, believe it or not. And you go for style points. Part of that's humor. Part of it is expression. Part of it is unusual comparisons. But part of it is packing information into very short little bits that come as part of something else. And so it's a fuller feel. That's how I like to write. I don't always succeed. And sometimes I go on and on and on, like I am now. But I think you're right. I think the idea is to get more. The more you know, the more you want to know, and the more you feel you know the people that you care about. And that's the one beautiful thing. You've been in sports all your life. I've been in sports all my life. When you get to pro sports, it's an interesting concept, because your labor force is also the product, and that doesn't exist, except like theater and movies maybe are the other places that exist, and it's a really interesting dynamic. And once you understand that there is that dynamic, then when you explore it, it's amazing what comes out and who you get to know and what you get to know, especially in this league, because particularly the American players, most of those players have been rejected in one form or the other, or in many forms and many others by the time they get up here. So there's very interesting stories there. Some of it's just based on body size, right? You're too small to play. You're too small to play linebacker, too big to play free safety, something like that.
Yeah, well, along those lines, just a quick story about Tyreek McAllister last year, who came on and was fantastic for the Tiger Cats, but I had a conversation with him, and he said his agent said, hey, we need some more relevant recent tape on you, video on you. I probably don't use tape anymore, digital video on you, and we got to get it out. So he said the CFL was my opportunity to get that, and did he ever? Because we're probably going to see him in the NFL next year.
Well, I think we are, especially now that they've changed the rules. At first, I thought we would see him back here, partly because he didn't get as much money to sign as one would expect. And when that happens, then you're a little bit farther down that list. But once they changed the return rules recently, and I think they were just approved, aren't they? The return rules in the NFL.
I believe they were, yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to change the roster makeups, and in favor of a guy like him. Yeah, he gambled on himself. I remember that. Was it when he got the touchdown? He made the team in the exhibition game, even though I think he wasn't actually on the roster for a while, by what he did against the Argos, I think, when he ran one back, and then at one point, and so did no, it wasn't.
Yeah. That was
him?
Gallimore.
Gallimore did it too.
In the preseason.
In the preseason.
McAllister was, I think, 4 games in.
4 games in. Yeah. So it was a gamble that paid off for him, and it's another sign of something that's happened here. That this is a thing that you'd only recognize this if you were a longtime fan, I think, and sort of an inside football fan. The history of returners here. Yeah. It's spectacular. I can't remember all of the names, but I can think of 3 or 4 instances in the last 15, 20 years where a returner has come in as a replacement for somebody, scored a touchdown on a return, and not got the nod the next week because the other person came back. right?
Yeah.
Now that with McAllister's case, it didn't, he got the job and kept the job. But some of them, and then some of them went on to do good things elsewhere. But it's just phenomenal. The number of, I think in the Jeff Reinbold era, there were something like 9 different players that took it to the house on a return, like either punt,
Yeah.
missed field goal, or and plus, and that's just counting Speedy once. Not 15 times or however many times he did it. So.
Yeah. Well, you've got half a century in sports. I've got almost
Right.
30 years
Right.
working
Boy,
in this role. A couple of vets chatting here, Steve.
yeah, sure.
But you talked about you being a writer. You've written a ton of books. You just haven't been writing in the newspaper. How many books have you written?
Authored or co-authored 25, I think.
Wow.
I mean, a good chunk of those, 13, I think, on figure skating. And surprisingly, just the one on football, and that would be Angelo Mosca's autobiography, which, if you haven't read it, it's quite interesting. And when Angelo said, "Boy, I got a story for you, and I've got the title for you," and that kind of thing, I'd written a lot of books, and I said, "Oh yeah, okay, Ange, sure." And then he tells me his story, and I actually, I'll never forget it. We were sitting in his beautiful home, his and Helen's beautiful home on the lake or on the canal, and down by Welland and or by St. Catharines, and he told me there was these high, slippery bar stools that were sitting at his table. He liked, he's a big guy, so he didn't want to have to sink down in a low chair. So we sat on those. And as he told me the story, right off the top, I remember going limp and slipping and sliding right off the chair. Like he caught me by surprise and what I'm referring to, of course, is his race. And that's how he started talking. He said, "You don't know this. Most people don't know this, but I am technically black." And then he said, "Now look at my face knowing that." And you go, "Whoa," And that whole story and about the anger of the household he grew up, it was, and the anger that came in him, it explained so much about what he did, but also remorse. And incredible remorse and wanting to change himself. It was a spectacular experience doing that book. Probably right there, my number 1 or 2 experiences in all those books, writing books, was that one.
Wow.
And at the same time, I'm writing the autobiography of, or as told to, Tessa Virtue and Scott Moir, which is figure skating.
Yep.
And all this gentility, and you're on all the time, and all these, and then, so I've got, one day I'm listening to him, and when you do a book and you've recorded somebody, that's all you hear is that person's voice. It's because you've got these earphones on and you're listening to 20 hours, 30, 50, 80, 100 hours of tape, and you really get the rhythm and and then I'm switching over the next day to do Tessa and Scott. It was quite something. So yeah, it's been books are I never considered them. It's not a big thrill for me, particularly to see my name on a byline or something. It's always nice the first time a book comes out, see what they did with the cover, or how the name. Yeah, maybe you're interested in how it sells. But generally, as I always explained it, RJ, was that unless you really hit a gold mine, books for me were, well, I need a new roof on the cottage, or I need drywall on the cottage, or that kind of thing. And okay, I better take this book, even though I don't have a lot of time for it. I plan to do some more. There's a few books there, maybe a greatest hits column, one of those things, because over 50 years, and I don't know how many, 13 million words were in print.
Who counted that?
I did an estimate on it. Yeah. And that includes a whole bunch of things. Like that included working back at Sportsnet, for instance, and I was their first general columnist when they decided to have a website. It worked for the Sporting News on their website, and for 2 years, RJ, I was writing for Sporting News and then CTV Sports in figure skating on their live website, and I did that for 2 years before I even saw the web. I didn't even know what it was. I used to be like one of those people that called it the web net. I didn't even know what it was called because I had no access to it. At that time. But they were ahead of the game. Both of those organizations were ahead of the game. So I did some stuff for them. So When you count all of those types of things, it's a lot of words. And so the idea would be to here's our times through the view of somebody that was at these things through 50 years, right? Like written, like go over the columns and then write a little entry and an exit on it. Here's what the times were at this time. Here's how this one was dated. Oh, here's one where I really blew it. Where I said I remember one running Tim Thomas out of town, and the only other player I probably encouraged to get out of town was Anthony Calvillo. And they're both. I mean, one went on a year later to win the Vezina Trophy and the Stanley Cup. One made the Hall of Fame and holds all of the records. Okay, so but Steve Milton decided they shouldn't be in this town.
So that's the key.
That's
get
the
on
key,
somebody's back
yeah,
if they're struggling.
If they're struggling, yeah, like get me to write about you and write negative. But rarely do I do that. I very rarely have done anything as negative as those two guys. And look at how those two turned out. So, I mean, terrifically. I mean, they both should be very proud of their careers.
Yes, this is. Of course, Steve Milton. I think most everybody knows Steve, whether you've seen him, heard him, or read some of his books or articles. I'm RJ Brodhead. Great to have you with us on this special presentation. I have to tell a story about you, Steve. You probably don't remember this, but when I first came to Toronto to work in sports, I was early 20s, just out of Saskatchewan, didn't know anyone. I'm at a Leafs practice. We're getting ready for scrums, and nobody knows me. You came over, you introduced yourself, you told me about you, and if I had any questions, hey, welcome. And it took Damien Cox 10 years to talk to me. I can say that because Damien and I are friends now. But,
yeah, he did the Red Fisher. He did the Red Fisher thing on you. I don't talk to rookies, right? Red was
exactly.
a big writer in Montreal, yeah. So,
but it was a little thing in that time that meant a lot to me, and I'm sure you don't even remember, but it stuck with me, and you've probably done that to dozens of young reporters and young people in the business over the years.
I certainly remember your first year there. I don't remember that particular incident, and I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself with you. But yeah, no, and you know what it's like trying to, and if anybody out there is in sports journalism or any kind of journalism, any business at all, pay it forward. Pay it forward. I mean, that's the deal. I mean, it wasn't. I'm sure you've paid it forward, that little thing. I'm sure you've done the same thing a million times since, and people did it for me when I was there. I mean, you come out of a little town like Aurelia, where they're still riding horses, and you come, suddenly you're on the, I mean, I'd been on the world scene through figure skating in the Olympics for years before I came down here, but, it was you got thrown in that pretty quickly to get thrown into the Blue Jays and then the Leafs right away. And luckily, because of the history I have in sports, dating back to the world's greatest, at least the best job in the history of Canadian teenage boys. I had it, and I had it for 3 years. And it goes back to then, So I wasn't really, and I'll tell you about it in a minute if you care to hear it, but
absolutely.
I wasn't overwhelmed by professional athletes because of the history I'd had with them. And but still, it's a bit, I mean, suddenly, everybody cares. I mean, those years, everybody cared about the Blue Jays. I mean, it was, I was with them in their biggest 10 years. In fact, I've said to them, in the 10 years I was there, I think you were eliminated from the playoffs. The earliest you were eliminated from postseason contention was 6 days before the end of the season, and you went to four. You went to four league finals and 2 World Series, which you won. I said, you should be hiring me. Just to go, because you take a look at that era when I was there 10 years, they haven't had a 10 years like that since, not even remotely close to it. And however you work it, they just they haven't won that many they haven't won any pennants since then. So when I was 17, I was playing football, thinking I was going to be a football guy. And my football coach also worked at a hockey school. And this is 1966, the summer of 66. I'm 17. And all of the Leafs, 7 of the Leafs are working there. Remember what the summer of 66 was? It's the last summer before their last championship, right? So I'm working there in the summer of 66, 67, and 68. So that included their last championship. And 5 or 6 of the Leafs are working there. Frank Mahovlich, like on one side of me was Frank Mahovlich. and the other side was Eddie Shack and Kent Douglas, and a bunch of guys were there. And late in the season, all of the Leafs would start. It wasn't like today where everybody's in shape for 12 months a year. They would play themselves into some kind of form so training camp didn't kill them. But they wouldn't be ready for training camp. So they would come to Tam O'Shanter, this hockey school, which was the biggest in the world at the time. It's where power skating was invented by the figure skaters who worked there. And the figure skaters had a rink there, and all of Canada's top figure skaters were at that rink during the summertime. So that's where I learned figure skating in 1966. But back to the Leafs, I would work with all of those guys and found out some guys were great, some just like the rest of us. They are just like the rest of us, these professional players. And it was, not only did we have the figure skating there, all of whom happened to be 17-year-old girls, which was fabulous for me. There was a swimming pool there because it was in Scarborough. So it was open every afternoon, and most of the people that went there were my age and that kind of thing. There was a bowling alley, play all the golf you wanted, play hockey. Like every Saturday night, we played hockey. And I remember one time, the aforementioned, where I was saying that the Leafs would come out, all the guys that didn't work there would come out and train or play these games madly on Fridays and Saturday nights to get in shape for training camp in Peterborough. And I they let me play. So because they were short. And so I'd be out there. I remember one night, Peter Mahovlich, who still is a close friend of mine because he's my age, and Frank Mahovlich are coming down 2-on-1 on me. And I just stopped. I said, "This is absurd," and I'd skated off. I said, "This is absurd." So the point there being, I wasn't overwhelmed by the presence of really high-end talent, people that you'd grown up idolizing, which I did with Frank Mahovlich, still probably my top 3 favorite athletes of all time. Mm-hmm. You could look us up, by the way. The Babe Ruth curse, everybody knows about that when they traded him to New York because they needed the money, so they could produce the play No Nanette. They traded from Boston to New York.
Yep.
Right after they'd won the World Series. Frank Mahovlich was a key player it was the best scorer they'd had probably since Charlie Conacher, so 45 years. He sometimes had double the goals that the next player on the Leafs had. And he had a spectacular Stanley Cup that year. And the next year they traded him to Detroit, where he stayed a couple of years, got 49 goals, I think, one year, and then to Montreal. So essentially, he eventually got traded, it was really traded to their biggest rival. They haven't won since. That is the curse. The real curse on the Maple Leafs is the Frank Mahovlich trade. And you could look this up, and I cannot be talked out of it. So,
well,
there we go.
I mean,
I don't know how we ended up on
something.
that, but yeah.
But that's what's great about you, Steve. You're a fantastic storyteller, and these stories pop into your head. One thing you're going to have to do, though, if you're on the broadcast, you're going to have to hit some time. So you're going to see this one.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I've always studiously ignored that, but
yeah,
I'll do my very best because, well, you're professional. You'll get me.
Yeah, I'll just say,
right
Steve, stop. We got to go.
Stop now. Yeah, and don't be afraid to say that. We're tired of you talking. So.
Well, we're definitely not tired of you talking.
No.
We're excited to see everything and hear everything you're going to be doing. Do you have kind of a schedule yet, or is that still to be determined?
I think we're proceeding. Lots of things. I think we have to all remember, and I wrote about this in my farewell column at the Spectator about, or maybe it was the farewell to the Grey Cup. I think it might have been in that part where most people outside of the Tiger Cats and those that are close watchers of them, which I have been for a long, long time, don't realize how much the people here, and it wasn't a huge staff, did in the last 3 years with 2 home Grey Cups, with the outdoor game, which was essentially theirs, with the hockey, with the soccer, and all those international soccer games in there, Champions League, playing soccer in the wintertime, a couple of other big events, Arkells, all of those kinds of things, which was all under their purview. And definitely the citywide Grey Cup thing, that was theirs. They basically did it. And even though CFL ostensibly ran it 3 years ago, it was the Ticats basically engineering everything. they had to. I mean, and that basically just ended in December, right? So they had a lot to sort of get over and reestablish and rest from, and sort of recalibrate for, because the next 3 years aren't going to look quite that. There's not going to be two Grey Cups here in the next 3 years as there
Right.
were in the last 3 years. So. Uh, um, it's not going to look like that. So it took a while to figure out where to go and what to do, and so we just decided on the general concept recently, just a few days ago. That's why I've been so quiet about things. I didn't want to mention anything to anybody that this may or may not happen. I didn't want to put the possibility out there in case it didn't. And so that's why we haven't nailed down everything. But you can bet that I'll be a lot on Ticat Audio with you and with others. I'll be doing notebooks. That's one of the journalistic mainstream heritage journalistic things we're going to be bringing to the site is a notebook type of thing, both oral and in print, tying a lot of things together.
Explain that, Steve, for maybe
Well,
some people who
notebooks
don't know.
are types of things where you might have 7 or 8. Let's say I'm at a Ticat practice during training camp. That's where it'll happen the most because there are so many things going on there, and you might have 8 different 4 paragraph. Like we're talking about the print part here. 4 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs of saying, hey, so and so is looking really, really good, and did you know that he played his college ball at North Texas State, where former Ticat quarterback Dane Evans coached in the pandemic year. Those little connection type things, and those things lead to more type things. And this player looks good, and he may be, and then you segment them into, so you've heard about this player a little bit. Now here's a little more about this player, and then I will take those and that notebook and also do an audio broadcast and make perhaps a visual podcast of things slightly different with a lot of the same information, and that will be done, of course, vocally. And that's what the notebooks are really good that way, because there are a lot of things that you can't blow into a full column. You should just write. Notebooks were a very, very big thing of my last several years in mainstream media, because it was a way of getting things that weren't being covered enough. You get them in a day or two later, and then upgrade them on a timeline too. Here, remember when they signed this guy 3 or 4 weeks ago? Well, here's some things that have happened to him in those 3 or 4 weeks. Those kinds of things. Now that's
Little
just
snippets.
little snippets, and
Almost like social media.
Almost like social media. Very similar. Very similar. Things that Cam Cole was one of the great columnists of my time in this country, probably the best in his era. Used to have things that he used to call those types of things that may grow up into columns one day, right? Right.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily a column right now, but they're worth mentioning, and they help. Again, this all comes back to storytelling, and storytelling, part of it is repetition. I don't mean necessarily the key facts you'll always repeat. That's what storytelling is. That's what the oral tradition is, and the oral tradition and visual tradition is a big part of what we do here, particularly on the audio network. Repetition is a big part of that, but so does coming back to the same thing and adding little bits to stuff about somebody you already know. And pretty soon, in your mind, without you even knowing it, you have a larger portfolio of, let's say, whoever the right tackle is this year. Because now you've mentioned him 7 or 8 different times over the last 3 months in different contexts. All right, so that's what Notebook is. There'll be other things that we'll be doing interviews, like specific interviews, and a lot of concept pieces too. There'll be. I'll point you to one, and this is a little bit off. We won't get to this for a little while, but I was walking through the kitchen before the Grey Cup, and I got talking to the chefs and the head chef, and we got talking about a lot of different things. And I said, I noticed that you feed the Ticats and the forage every day, right? I mean, they get a meal. It's part of they're both heavy salary cap leagues, so those are actually part of the salary cap. They, the things you spend there. I said, are they all the same? Well, that just set him like that. He went, holy smokes. And he started talking. So we'll bring the nutritionist in too. There is an incredible difference by people living in the same building, dressing, 50 feet apart in their dressing room. Both high caliber teams, always challenging for playoffs and championships. Total difference in the kind of things that they have to, the diets that they have to have, what they need to eat. In football, it's essentially about calories. It's about feeding this incredible energy that and physical weight and types of things that need to be maintained. Where in soccer, it's much more
endurance.
Endurance, and the food shows that, and different types of flexibility. I mean, obviously both sports have to be flexible, but there's a very, like, the nutrition value and the fact that one is about calories and one is about and I wouldn't say nutrition because they're both very nutritious. So we're going to do something on that and on all the platforms. And those are the kinds of things that you learn a little more. If you learn a little more about Tim Hortons Field, you learn a little more about the Ticats and the Forge. I mean, I would never have guessed that there was such, like, the chef just jumped on it right. So he said, it's totally different. And that caught me by surprise. Those little things, if you go around and you just talk to people, you find stuff. You find those little things, and that's what storytelling, and I'm going to keep coming back to that phrase because that's what we do. And the more of it we do, the better we get at it, and I hope we get better at it. If we don't, we're really in trouble. So.
Well, that's the nutrition is something, after you say it, it makes a lot of sense.
It does,
and it was I wouldn't have thought of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what do they call that in fiction? When that's something like that happens, they call it the shock of recognition. It's something you always knew, but you didn't know.
See?
You know what I mean? Like, and
the intelligence of Steve Milton.
Like it comes out of you. So that's what we're looking. And it's stuff. And people who are listening here, maybe we should encourage them, RJ, to get a hold of either of us if they've got ideas that things.
True.
Hey, I never knew. Can you tell me why this or that? Like Forge, for instance, we're going to do a piece on the different soccer balls. That there's a different soccer ball used for CPL and Canadian Championship than there is for, say, CONCACAF, and the ball acts differently. And
wow!
We can pull up film to show you exactly how it acts differently. So if they get back to CONCACAF and we see it again, we're going to do something on it. Who would have thought of that? Now, soccer people know that. Inside soccer people go, of course. Well, that's the thing. That's the good thing about being a bit of an outsider. Like, we're not total insiders on this, right? We're observers, maybe inside. Yep. Maybe we have a lot more access than most people will have observing. But to us, it's not, of course, the ball is different. Like, that's an interesting thing, right? There was a goal scored. I forget who got it. It was in one of the CONCACAF games here where the ball just went straight down and fooled the goalie because that's the way that ball acts.
Wow.
So I know, nuts, eh?
Yeah.
And if you see enough of those things, anyways, if there's things like that our viewers or readers happen to see and they wonder why, ask us those questions. Like, our emails are all over the place, right? So it's easy to get a hold of us. Say, just write in and pen in and say, hey, could you guys find out why this or that? And we'll get to it. We may not, and that's a good thing. Like in a notebook, hey, reader Bob Jones or reader Clara Smith has asked us here's what we found out. Those are the other kinds of things you can do. I mean, who knows how much of this we'll get to, but we want to. We definitely want to.
Definitely. I know the feeling, as do you, when you come across a story that isn't out there and you're able to tell that story. A little one last year is James Butler, and he said he choreographs 2 touchdown celebrations per game, and then will freelance. If he winds up getting more, he'll freelance it, but he's always got 2 in his back pocket. He's always studying. Guys are giving him little ideas. So it was just kind of fun to talk about in the broadcasts. If James Butler, the Tiger Cats are on the one, we might be seeing a choreographed celebration. Then it turned into something that Luke and I could describe to the listeners.
And how much better does that make your broadcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tremendously.
Way better.
Those little polishes, like it's like polishing the genie's lamp, like it just gives you that little, out comes the genie, like
yeah.
And I will say to people, RJ's downplaying himself on this, that it takes work to come up with those things. First of all, you got to notice them. Second of all, you got to have the relationship with the people, so they tell you and trust you that, hey, he's not going to screw up this story.
Yes.
I'm going to tell him because I trust him. So now I wasn't there when you were told that story, but I know how the process works, and that's exactly the way it works. So that speaks to your unearthing of things, and you might have heard him say something, and you could have easily just passed on it and just said, "Oh yeah, that's interesting," but you went and got more.
Yeah.
And it just gave you that extra couple of minutes of great.
I always try to put myself in I'm still a fan,
Right.
even though I'm a broadcaster. And so what do I want to know? And if I'm at a game or I'm watching a game or I'm listening to a game and I know if James Butler gets a touchdown, he's going to do some sort of performance. And, you kind of got to guess what it is. It's kind of exciting.
It is.
Now you're going to watch for it.
That's right. And you may never get to use it.
Right.
I got actually pretty good story on that one. The Tom Cheek, when Toronto, the Blue Tom Cheek, for those of you that are too young to remember, was the legendary voice of I can't hear Blue Jays baseball without thinking about Tom Cheek.
Go to Rogers Center. You'll see his name on the Wall of Honor.
All those games in a row, 4,000, 5,000, or whatever it was. So in 1992, the Jays won the World Series on the road, and that meant that they didn't have last at bats. Atlanta did. And so it was going to be a big, big moment. And I can still see Mike Timlin taking his time almost, throwing the ball to first base, Joe Carter catching it and jumping up and down. And Tom Cheek, I'm there, so I don't hear the broadcast. But Tom and I were close friends, and he lamented to me for several times over the next year. He said, I can't believe it. Momentous occasion like that, and I didn't have something prepared. I did not have that little, he said they were going to win the World Series and this big thing, and I didn't have anything. He had a good call, but he said I didn't have that memorable call. Next year, they're the home team, and they're down, and Joe Carter hits the thing. He had no chance to prepare for that, zero chance, and he comes up with probably the second most iconic call in the history of Canadian sports. Number one being Henderson has scored for Canada. Number two being touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit
a bigger home run than that.
I get a chill thinking about that. So that's the reverse of doing the homework and being prepared and all of those kinds of things. You've also got to have that spontaneity to be able to handle something you're not expecting. Nobody expected Joe Carter, particularly to hit it down and away slider. So,
yeah, it's so true. It's that's the beauty of this sport, and we try to put pictures and insight to the readers, viewers, and listeners. And you're the perfect guy to do it, Steve.
Well, the longer we go on, and maybe I'll ask you this: how long have you been with this company now? 3 years?
2021. So this will be year 4.
Year four. Right. So. Are there highlights from what you've seen on this team? Is there 3 or 4 that you could go, wow, I'll never forget that?
Yeah. There are. It's almost more accomplishments.
Right. Because there was a lot of that. There was a lot of accumulated accomplishments in those last 3 or 4 years. Yes.
Yeah, like I go back to the East Final in 2021 and the second half against the Argos. It kind of looked bleak at halftime, and it was just an amazing. Everything came together in the second half, and making it to the Grey Cup was pretty exciting.
In the second half.
Yeah,
after a horrible first half. And remember the play that turned that game around? Dane stripped the ball. He threw an interception, and right near the end of the first half, he took the ball away. If the Argos score then, Ticats aren't going to the Grey Cup.
Yep.
They're too far behind, in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great memory. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you have a great relationship with Simone Lawrence, and he's an ambassador now. I'm going to miss him on the field for sure, but getting to know him's been great. It was a big deal last year when Bo Levi Mitchell came in. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, and I have to be honest, I'm pretty excited to see him this year. I haven't talked to Bo, so this isn't inside information, but it's just, 30 years of covering sports, I feel like he's going to be a very motivated quarterback, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year. What are your thoughts?
I feel the same way. In fact, I'm just looking out over the window here because I thought I might see Bo go into the field. He's been here at the stadium this week throwing practice, and I missed him every time. I just want to say hi. I haven't seen him all winter. I've been kind of laying low when it comes to that. I don't want players to say, "What are you doing around here?" Because then I either have to lie or I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. But the cat's out of the bag now. So
Yes.
I think that's interesting, and to have a backup that has shown that he can come in and do some stuff. A young backup, I think, with Taylor in there. That's a really interesting thing. And all of the new guys that they signed. I mean, it's a different looking team, but kind of the same team too. And with Scott having a training camp to go here, I think he felt he was up to maybe 30-40% of the offense he would have liked to put in by the end of the year. But part of that was, you couldn't develop it because they were in such desperate straits to win enough games to make the playoffs that, that he never got a chance to put a lot of that stuff in. So that having the whole off season with Bo and having had Bo play for him, he's got a lot. There's a bigger head start here now. I'm really interested in to see where that offense starts in training camp. Because, last year that offense was supposed to carry till the defense got itself together. That's the feeling I had. I'm feeling the same this year, right? They've strengthened and changed the way they're doing defense. Have changed the defense quite a bit. So it might take a little time for that to catch up. Generally, defenses are supposed to be ahead of offenses early, but I'm not sure that's the case here this year. I think that these guys, I want to see how much they hit the ground running. Now, they got to figure out a bunch of things. Like, they've got way too many receivers. And I don't mean in numbers. I'm talking about good receivers, people that can play, that have proven they can play in this league or sure look like they can. So that's going to be interesting there. But the middle of the line set, it looks like they're pretty well set to tackle. There's obviously set at running back. We'll see what happens if they go to tight end. If they, that's going to be an interesting one too, because the ratios. And we'll do some explaining on all the sites, a little more detail on the ratio, because the way the ratio things have changed, and it's very confusing for a lot of people about the designated Americans. So we'll try and find a simple way to do that, and I think we may have to do that through graphs and all of those other visuals. You got a great support tech group here. They're really good at that stuff. I'm not going to touch. I'm just going to say, can you do this kind of thing, and get that up there, and we can talk about it. You and I, or whoever can talk about it. But it changes. It looks to me, particularly with a Canadian middle linebacker, that there's some ratio flexibility, what you want in this league. You definitely want it. You want it, and also the kind of players even the new ones they brought in, a lot of them can be what they quote unquote call designated Americans, because they've been in the league long enough that they can replace a Canadian during the game if they have to, right? You'd rather not see that happen. But does that
But then
change?
there's only so many snaps they can play, and it is complicated.
It is very complicated, and that's what we got to do. That's what journalists do, not just sports journalists do. We take we should, when we're at our best, we take complicated situations and explain them so the average person, and I don't mean to use the word average that's probably the wrong word because I hate average, but so that
someone who's maybe not a diehard fan that follows every second.
That's right.
To be able to explain it to them so they understand.
We do that all the time. One of my favorite all-time cartoons about journalism is a guy sitting back in his chair working at the New York Times with a blindfold on, and there's a dartboard up there, and instead of the numbers on the dartboard, it has concepts: sewage, politics, sports, war. And he's throwing a dart saying, which thing am I an expert at today? In other words, we're taking all of these complicated things. Malcolm Gladwell does this extremely well. He's probably the best who's ever been at it, and boils down all these complicated principles so the regular human beings can understand it and grasp it and go, I see that now. I get it, and he's taken something quite complicated so that at least it's manageable. You could put it in a sandwich and eat it, so.
Well, we're getting close to an hour here, Steve. So
really?
We appreciate everybody who's hung around and chatted.
Yeah.
We're going to do this a lot throughout the season.
Sure.
I know you and I are going to have a few shows, and it'll be fun. Forge fans, Ticats fans, you'll get the up-to-date information from the great, the Hall of Famer, Steve Milton, and of course, historical information. We had some of that in this conversation, Steve. It's extremely interesting, and not everybody is up to date on all the historical facts. So with your experience, to be able to share it, it's going to be great.
Well, history lives, right? And that's an important thing. We're not going to live in the past here, believe me. That's the last thing we're going to do is live in the past. We're going to move. This is about the present, future, and a little bit of look into the past, but the past informs us. The past is inside us, all of us, even if we weren't alive then, because that's what we built upon, right? And it gets us to where we are today a lot of times. So sometimes it helps to have a little context there, and there's a lot going on in the present, and there's an awful lot going on in this present that we're in right now.
Absolutely, there is. I can't wait for the seasons to start, and they're right around the corner. We'll be starting up right away, but
Saturday.
To be able to read Steve Milton's articles, to be able to see him, and to be able to hear him, it's just fantastic. Welcome to the Hamilton Sports Group and the audio networks, and can't wait to read all your stuff and have some conversations with you, Steve. Great to have you as a teammate.
Well, we're off to a good start, RJ, and it's great after, again, all these years to work with you encore une fois.
This has been a special presentation of the Ticats Audio Network. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review wherever you find our content.